alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Greetings all, welcome to the SwordLab. It's finally here, my review of the LK Chen Song era Zhan Dao. So, this is it. If you have been following the channel or our channels for a while, you may have remembered my original response to Metatron over the origin of this particular weapon. This weapon is invented in the Song Dynasty and it essentially stays there. It is not reproduced. After that, the name persists, but those names are applied to different weapons going through the era. The true Zhan Dao, the Song era Zhan Dao, as we see here, is a specific weapon that was created for military use in the Song Dynasty, as we have said. The characteristics of the use of the sword have to do with the Song Dynasty's lack of horses. Now, I won't get into the whole reason for the lack of horses that the Song Dynasty was incurring. There are other great videos out there. Go check out the Scholar General's video on the horse problem right there. So the way the weapons were created for the military in the Song Dynasty is different than other dynasties. The construction and production of weapons and armor was done in workshops that were owned and operated by the military themselves. We actually have a good paper trail of this particular weapon, as you see it here, from Song Dynasty records. The invention and creation of the workshop is recorded in the Song history, and the weapon shows up a lot in different texts for armament, supplies to going to different forts and all of that. So we know that it was a weapon that was mass produced, batches of tens of thousands, and it was used on the frontier and in fortifications and all of that. So we understand that these specifications are fairly standard. Historical examples, of course, do follow this basic design. Now, the method of using them in the military was to go into a advancing cavalry unit, usually stopped by some sort of anti-cavalry methods like caltrops or long weapons, that kind of thing, and they would use this weapon here to chop at the hooves of the horses, as the armor on the horses pretty much stops down at the leg. That's the only vulnerable part. As such, this has to be a pretty beefy weapon. It has to be able to withstand a lot of forces as far as armor, and of course being able to cut a horse or hoofs, that kind of thing.
No, sir, I don't like it.
It's also designed so that if a rider falls off and now you are there, you're not defenseless, right? So you can still wield this around like a normal kind of hilt-based sword. So it kind of operates that way as well. So it is usually associated with the General Yue Fei. There is no actual evidence that Yue Fei used this particular weapon. However, there is mention of him issuing and using something called a hemp-wrapped dao, or hemp-wrapped saber, and it is used in much the same way as a Zhan Dao. The hypothesis is, of course, that it is a Zhan Dao, and it's a pretty good guess. On to the weapon itself. As I said, this is a weapon that is reproduced from both historical examples and textual evidence. So we have a paper trail of it. The paper trail says that the blade should be about 3 feet long. This blade here is 33 inches. The text says that this should be at least 1/3 the length of the blade. This is probably closer to 2/3. It is a 19-inch handle from the start of the ring to the guard here. The handle is full tang, so it goes all the way through to both sides, and then there are 2 pieces of wood slapped to the side. The wrapping on the handle here is a hemp linen, which is, of course, relating to the Yue Fei weapon, the hemp-wrapped Dao. Hence, it is also called the Song Hemp-Wrapped Zhan Dao on the site. The guard here is a disc guard that has this almond or teardrop shape here. This edge lines up with the edge of the weapon. Now, one of the big features of Song era Dao, and especially the Zhan Dao here, is this tip. This clip here, we usually see it oriented like this, with the edge down here. But here, the edge is down here, which makes it longer than the spine. What that does is it brings the balance point and point of percussion forward on the blade, brings the spine right behind more of the edge, so you can get a more precise chopping, cleaving type of energy out of here. Also, because much of this will be used kind of at its extreme, there's a lot of chopping power here up in here in the tip, which is unusual for some Dao. Another thing about the blade is slightly narrower down by the guard than it is by the tip. This gives the blade geometry a slightly forward cant when you are holding it here, so that the edge is slightly angled that way. That also serves to put more of the weight up here into the tip there. You can see this blade shape a lot on competition choppers that you see in cutting competitions these days, if you watch Forged in Fire and those knife making shows and that kind of thing. So same idea that's happening here. Weapon in its entirety weighs just under 6 pounds. I think it's about 5.9 for this particular piece. They'll, range in there. The balance point of balance here is just up here, so you've got plenty of leverage. The ring pommel here is integral to the whole sword, so it's not a separate piece. There's no peening, anything like that. It's simply welded to the tang, which you can see kind of protruding right there. I believe the guard is pressure fit, pounded on and that, and there's probably a little bit of epoxy or something like that to keep there. I have not found any problems with anything loosening up as far as fittings go. This thing is pretty much one big piece of steel with a guard and wrapped handle and some wood stuck to it, so there's not a whole lot that can fail on you here. The craftsmanship is quite good, and it's what you would expect from a military grade standard issue weapon. So it is very realistic in that way. Now, of course, we don't know what the real period pieces looked like when they were issued. We don't know what their hilts looked like or all of that. So a couple of the problems that I've had with it, just this. Pretty much the handle wrap has kind of come undone here. Any place that I've had my hand, it has kind of come loose. I don't know if it's the adhesive or it's the actual material, but probably what they should think about doing is maybe doing a more of an overlap to each of these pieces, or putting another layer on there or whatever. But as you can see, you can kind of see a little bit of what that handle looks like. It is highly polished. I don't know if you can see this. It's pretty much a mirror polish. The drawback to that is that it shows every smudge and fingerprint that gets on there, so you're constantly having to wipe it down if it's on display and you're handling it at all. Okay, so performance and handling of this beast. There are no extant martial arts forms for this weapon. It doesn't exist in any martial arts that I know of, and it pretty much went out of use after the Song Dynasty. The name, however, was not retired, and it was given to other weapons throughout history. One of those weapons is the Pudao, which we have talked about, and that is a long-handled saber. Sometimes it's anywhere from this long, about 20 inches long, to much longer, as you can see here. These forms tend to translate fairly well for this weapon. There are forms that are done with a Pudao that has a handle about this length. They will generally have a shorter blade, but that is something that you can accommodate for fairly well. So the Ming Dynasty Zhan Dao, or Pudao, is a good weapon stand-in for this, that you could use a form from that, or techniques from a form, to come up with some for your Zhan Dao. Next, the Miao Dao, which is a long saber, or the Chang Dao, as it was called in the Ming Dynasty. That is also sometimes called a Zhan Dao. Those forms also work fairly well. There are some things that you have to adapt as far as getting the hang of the weight, hang of the follow through, all of that, but the weight and the handling are similar. Lastly, if you practice Bagua Zhang and you do Bagua Dao, this may be something that you could use for your Bagua Dao forms. It's not perfect, of course. It's got a much longer handle than most Bagua Dao, but it has similar properties and weight, so it would probably serve the same purposes that the Bagua Dao tries to train. It obviously cuts very well. Soft targets, medium hard targets, and thick targets basically bow to the superiority of this huge sharpened steel bar. Not much will get in the way of it. I've cut a little bit of wood with absolutely no damage or sign on the blade. I will be doing more exact tests and more punishing tests to this guy soon, as well as coming up with training methods for the weapon. So stay tuned for that. All right, there we go. The Song Era Zhan Dao by L.K. Chen. If you do Kung Fu, there are plenty of weapons forms and stuff that you can substitute this guy in there with and explore on your own and find out what are the parameters of this particular thing. It's probably not going to have parameters that we're used to for dueling and sparring, but we have to keep that in mind anyway. So stay tuned. We are going to be coming up with putting this through some punishment and trying to come up with some training methods for it. So if you have one or you are going to get one, that should be very interesting. Anyway, thank you for tuning in. Like, share, and subscribe. Patience, practice, perseverance. Happy savoring.